Ambassador Cthera stood before the full-length mirror in her quarters aboard the Zenithian flagship, admiring her crystalline skin that sparkled under the soft purple lights. Her iridescent scales shifted colors with each movement, creating a mesmerizing rainbow effect that was the hallmark of her species' beauty. She adjusted her ceremonial robes, made from the finest silk metal alloy in the Empire, and practiced her diplomatic smile one last time. "Ambassador," her assistant's voice came through the intercom, "we're approaching Earth's orbit." Cthera's smile faded immediately. Earth. The very word made her scales ripple with disgust. She walked to the viewport, watching as the blue planet grew larger. Somewhere down there, millions of humans were going about their primitive lives, completely unaware of how repulsive they appeared to advanced species like the Zenithians. "What a waste of perfectly good space," she muttered, thinking about the reports she'd studied. Humans were so flawed. Their skin was either completely smooth or covered in patches of fur, with no beautiful scales in sight. Their eyes didn't change color with their emotions, and their bodies couldn't naturally produce bioluminescence. How they managed to achieve space travel with such primitive forms was beyond her understanding. The ship entered Earth's atmosphere, and Cthera felt her stomach turn. 6 months. She would have to spend 6 whole months among these creatures, pretending they were equals in the galactic community. The very thought made her want to request an immediate transfer back to the capital. As the ship descended toward the United Earth Government headquarters in New Geneva, Cthera reviewed her mission briefing one last time. Establish diplomatic relations, assess human technological capabilities, and determine if they were worthy of full membership in the Galactic Alliance. She already knew her answer would be negative. How could any species so physically inferior be worthy of joining the greatest civilizations in the galaxy? The landing was smooth, as expected from Zenithian technology. Through the viewport, Cthera could see the welcoming committee waiting on the landing pad. Her scales turned a sickly green at the sight of all those human faces, so exposed, so vulnerable, so ugly. "Remember," she told herself, straightening her posture, "you are a daughter of the Crystal Peaks. You represent the most beautiful and advanced species in the known galaxy. These creatures are beneath you, but diplomacy requires sacrifice." The ship's doors opened with a soft hiss, and the cool Earth air rushed in. Cthera activated her translator implant and prepared to face what she considered the greatest challenge of her diplomatic career, pretending that humans were worth her time and attention. Little did she know, this assignment would change not just her view of humanity, but of beauty itself. Cthera's first day at the United Earth Government headquarters was going exactly as terribly as she had expected. The human officials kept trying to shake her hand, a barbaric custom that involved touching skin to skin. She had quickly developed a habit of keeping her ceremonial robes wrapped tightly around herself, creating a barrier between her and these creatures. Then came the moment that made her scales turn almost black with rage. The head of security approached her office, carrying a datapad with personnel files. "Ambassador Cthera," the aging human woman said, "I'm Director Sarah Martinez. We need to assign you a personal security detail during your stay on Earth." Cthera's bioluminescent spots flared with annoyance. "I have my own security team from the Empire." "With all due respect, Ambassador, the agreement clearly states that Earth security must be involved in protecting foreign diplomats. We've selected our best officer for you." Before Cthera could protest further, the door opened, and a human male walked in. He was tall for his species, with dark hair cut short in what she assumed was their military style. His posture was straight, professional, and his brown eyes held a calm confidence that immediately irritated her. "Ambassador, this is Commander James Chen, head of our Diplomatic Security Division. He has a perfect record protecting VIPs from 17 different worlds." Commander Chen gave a slight bow. At least he knew better than to offer his hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Ambassador. I've studied Zenithian protocols extensively to ensure I won't cause any cultural offense." Cthera's translator picked up no tremor in his voice, no sign of the awe or intimidation humans usually showed in the presence of her species. How dare he act so composed? This is unacceptable, she declared. I refuse to have an Earth security detail. Director Martinez's smile remained diplomatic. I'm afraid this isn't negotiable, Ambassador. It's standard protocol. Commander Chen will maintain a respectful distance, but must remain close enough to ensure your safety. Thera wanted to argue further, but she knew it would only make her look petty in front of these primitives. Instead, she turned to Chen and said coldly, "Very well. But understand this, Commander. You are to remain at least 5 meters from me at all times unless there's an immediate threat." "Of course, Ambassador," Chen replied, still maintaining that infuriatingly professional demeanor. "I'll be nearly invisible. You'll hardly know I'm there." But as Kythera returned to her office, she was acutely aware of his presence outside her door. It felt like an insult, being forced to rely on a human for protection. She spent the rest of the day drafting a formal complaint to the Zenithian High Council, demanding Chen's replacement. Little did she know, this human would soon prove himself in ways she never expected. The grand ballroom of the United Earth Government headquarters sparkled with lights and laughter. Thera stood near the refreshment table, trying her best to avoid direct contact with the hundreds of humans and aliens attending the first interstellar cultural exchange gala. Her scales shimmered with barely contained discomfort as diplomats from 20 different worlds mingled around her. Commander Chen maintained his usual position, exactly 5 meters away as requested. Over the past 2 weeks, Kythera had grown grudgingly accustomed to his presence. He was efficient, quiet, and surprisingly good at anticipating her needs, though she would never admit this aloud. "Ambassador Kythera," a human diplomat approached her, glass in hand. "Your speech about Zenithian art was fascinating." She forced herself to nod politely, noticing from the corner of her eye how Chen's attention suddenly sharpened. His head turned slightly toward the entrance, and his hand moved closer to his concealed weapon. Then everything happened at once. The massive windows overlooking the city exploded inward. Black-clad figures rappelled into the ballroom, their weapons already firing. Screams erupted as guests dove for cover. "Death to alien sympathizers," one of the attackers shouted. Thera stood frozen for a split second, her scales turning pale with fear. Then she felt something solid slam into her, knocking her to the ground. It was Chen. He covered her body with his own as energy bolts sizzled overhead. "Stay down," he commanded, firing his weapon with deadly accuracy at the attackers. Kythera watched in stunned silence as Chen moved with incredible speed and precision. He took down 3 attackers while keeping her shielded, his movements fluid and practiced. When one of the terrorists tried to flank them, Chen spun around, putting himself directly in the line of fire. The energy bolt meant for Kythera hit him in the shoulder. Despite the obvious pain, he maintained his position, returning fire and dropping the attacker. Within minutes, security forces flooded the room. The remaining terrorists were quickly subdued, but Kythera barely noticed. She was staring at Chen, who was now leaning against a wall, pressing his hand against his wounded shoulder. His breathing was labored, but his eyes remained alert, scanning for any remaining threats. "You're injured," she said, surprised by the concern in her own voice. "It's nothing, Ambassador. Are you unarmed?" For the first time since arriving on Earth, Kythera looked, truly looked, at the human before her. Blood seeped between his fingers, his formal uniform was torn, and yet his first thought was still for her safety. Perhaps, she realized with a start, she had been blind to a different kind of beauty all along. Kythera found herself walking the sterile halls of the medical wing for the 3rd time that week. She told herself it was merely protocol. Checking on an injured security officer was expected of any diplomat. Yet something felt different about these visits. Commander Chen sat propped up in his hospital bed, reading from a tablet. His shoulder was wrapped in regenerative bandages, and the doctors said he would make a full recovery. He looked up as she entered, offering that same calm smile that used to irritate her, but now stirred something unfamiliar in her chest. Ambassador, he greeted her. You didn't have to visit again. I brought you something, she said, placing a small device on his bedside table. It's a Zenithian healing crystal. It helps with pain. Chen's eyes widened slightly, the first time she'd seen him truly surprised. That's incredibly thoughtful. But isn't this something usually reserved for your own people? Thera's scales shifted to a soft pink, a color of embarrassment she hoped he couldn't interpret. You took an energy bolt meant for me. By our laws, that makes you worthy of our healing arts. He activated the crystal, and soft music filled the room. A side effect of the healing frequencies. Chen closed his eyes, listening. This is beautiful. I've never heard anything like it. Really? Kythera sat in the chair beside his bed, curiosity overtaking her usual reserve. But humans have music too. I've seen it in the cultural briefings. We do. Chen reached for his tablet. But it's very different. Would you like to hear some? For the next hour, Kythera found herself immersed in human music. Everything from classical symphonies to modern fusion pieces. She was amazed by the range of emotions these supposedly primitive beings could express through sound. How do you create such complex harmonies without natural resonance chambers? She asked, forgetting momentarily to maintain her diplomatic distance. Chen laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. We compensate with creativity, I suppose. That's one thing humans are good at, finding beautiful ways to work with our limitations. Kythera found herself studying his face as he spoke passionately about Earth's artistic heritage. The features she had once dismissed as ugly now seemed interesting, expressive. His eyes, in particular, held a depth that no Zenithian's color-changing ones could match. When she finally left his room that evening, Kythera realized with a start that she had spent 3 hours talking to a human, and had enjoyed every minute of it. Her beliefs about human inferiority were beginning to crack, and she wasn't sure how to feel about that. Kythera couldn't sleep. Her quarters felt too quiet without the sound of Chen's footsteps outside her door. He had returned to duty that morning, and their daily conversations in the medical wing had ended. She found herself missing them with an intensity that frightened her. Her reflection in the mirror caught her attention. The perfect crystalline scales, the color-changing eyes, the bioluminescent patterns, all the features that made Zenithians the most beautiful species in the galaxy. Yet lately, she'd begun to question what beauty truly meant. Chen's face kept appearing in her thoughts, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the determined set of his jaw when he was serious, the gentle way his hands moved when explaining something he was passionate about. None of these features fit the Zenithian ideal of beauty, but they stirred something deep within her. This is madness, she whispered to her reflection. Her scales rippled with conflicting emotions, fear, confusion, and something else she didn't dare name. A priority message flashed on her communication panel. It was from the Zenithian High Council. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Ambassador Kythera, reports indicate concerning levels of human interaction. Your daily visits to the injured security officer have not gone unnoticed. Remember your position and the purity of our species. Return to the Empire immediately for evaluation and potential decontamination. Kythera's scales turned ash-gray with shock. Decontamination meant having her memories of Earth erased, being purified of any sympathies toward lesser species. The thought of forgetting Chen made her physically ill. As if summoned by her thoughts, there was a knock at her door. Chen stood there, looking troubled. Ambassador, I've intercepted some concerning communications. The Zenithian Empire. They're not just here for diplomacy, are they? Kythera's world tilted on its axis. She had a choice to make. Maintain her species' supposed superiority, or acknowledge the truth she'd been learning day by day. That beauty, strength, and worth came in many forms. Looking at Chen's concerned face, she made her decision. Her scales shifted to the deep blue of resolve. Come in, Commander. there's something you need to know about the Empire's real plans for Earth. The Zenithian Empire considers humans a threat, Kythera explained, pacing her quarters while Chen listened intently. Not because of your weapons or technology, but because of your ability to adapt and connect with other species. She pulled up classified documents on her personal terminal, her fingers trembling. Look at these invasion plans. They're using my diplomatic mission as cover to assess Earth's weaknesses. Chen studied the documents, his face growing darker with each revelation. They're planning to attack within the month. But why? We've done nothing to provoke them. Because you challenge everything we believe. Kythera's scales shifted to a deep purple of shame. Humans prove that physical appearance doesn't determine worth. Your species has achieved so much without the perfect features we pride ourselves on. The Empire fears this truth will spread. A sudden pounding at the door made them both freeze. Ambassador Kythera, by order of the High Council, you are to return to the Empire immediately. Chen moved swiftly, positioning himself between Kythera and the door. There's a secure passage through the diplomatic wing. We need to get this evidence to Earth's government. If I do this, I can never return home, Kythera whispered. Her scales flickered between fear-white and resolution blue. Chen turned to her, his eyes intense. Home is where you can be true to yourself. What do you believe is right? Looking at him, this human who had saved her life, challenged her beliefs, and shown her a different kind of beauty, Kythera made her choice. Her scales settled into a determined blue. We need to reach the broadcast center, she said, gathering the critical data. The Empire needs to answer for their prejudice, and both our peoples deserve to know the truth. As they slipped out through the secret passage, Kythera felt Chen's hand briefly squeeze hers. The touch she once would have recoiled from now gave her strength. Together, they raced against time to prevent a war born of prejudice and fear. The United Earth Government's broadcast center was eerily quiet as Kythera and Chen made their final preparations. Security cameras showed Zenithian forces approaching from multiple directions, but they still had a few precious minutes. Broadcasting on all frequencies, both Earth and Empire channels. Chen confirmed, his fingers flying over the controls. Ready when you are. Kythera stepped before the camera, her scales shimmering with determination. She began speaking, her voice clear and strong. People of Earth and the Zenithian Empire, I am Ambassador Kythera. What I'm about to share will shake both our worlds. She transmitted the invasion plans, watching as they appeared on screens worldwide. The Empire's attack on Earth isn't about security or resources. It's about fear. Fear of a species that proves our entire belief system wrong. She moved closer to Chen, deliberately taking his hand on camera. Her scales glowed with a new color, one no Zenithian had ever displayed before, a warm gold of pure affection. Look at us, she continued. I once thought humans ugly because they lacked our crystalline perfection. But I've learned that beauty exists in infinite forms. Human strength lies not in physical perfection, but in their capacity for growth, adaptation, and love. Alarms blared as Zenithian forces breached the building. Chen tightened his grip on her hand, ready to face whatever came next. To my people, we were wrong. Our obsession with physical perfection has blinded us to true beauty and to humanity. Thank you for teaching me that worth isn't measured by appearances. The doors burst open, but instead of soldiers, a group of younger Zenithians entered, their scales showing support green. Kythera's broadcast had sparked something unprecedented, a revolution within the Empire itself. In the days that followed, the invasion was cancelled. The High Council fell, replaced by reformers who sought true partnership with Earth. Kythera and Chen were appointed to lead a new cultural exchange program, breaking down centuries of prejudice. As they stood together at the program's inauguration, Chen smiled at Kythera. You know, you've started a revolution. She touched his cheek gently, her scales glowing that warm gold. No, we did. You helped me see that true beauty isn't about perfect features. It's about the perfection of being exactly who you are. And as they faced their future together, Cthera realized she'd found something far more precious than physical beauty. She'd found truth, love, and a new definition of perfection.